Today, I'm here together with James, and we will be talking about marathon pacing and long runs. So, James, would you be able to introduce yourself?
I'm a 70-minute half marathon runner, and I had 3 world records for the fastest half marathons in different fancy dress categories.
Perfect. So we'll get right started with the first question. James, how do I determine my ideal marathon pace?
Okay, so one of the most common tools that people tend to use for determining the marathon pace is taking your half marathon time and doubling it, and then adding 10 minutes to that time. So for instance, if I'm a 70-minute half marathon runner, when you double it, then add 10 minutes, that would put me at about 2:30 for the marathon. Another tool that some people will use is adding 10% to your time. So for instance, you will take your half marathon time and then times it by 2.1. So they're 2 of the most common ones that you can do. But another thing you can do is also use pace calculators. So for instance, if you've got a smartwatch like a Garmin, that will give you your predicted times based on your current training and current activity load. So I've recently had a 3-month break from running, so I've just started training again, and I've actually been checking because when you're training and you haven't been racing, sometimes you don't know what pace you can actually do. So I was kind of cross-referencing my recent results against my Garmin time predictor, and when I'm in my peak condition, my Garmin predictor is not so accurate. But right now, it's proving to be very accurate. So I recently done a 5K park run race in 15:52, and my predicted time on Garmin was 15:54. So it was accurate within 2 seconds. Similar, I'd done a half marathon in Taipei a few weeks ago, and that was in 74 minutes. And again, the predictor was within 10 seconds of being correct. So they can be quite good. Another pace calculator that you can use, there's plenty of websites, but one that I've used before is a website called smartpacing.com. That will basically allow you to adjust your pacing. So you can use your 5K time to adjust it to a marathon pace or half marathon pace or 10K pace. Similarly, like, if you've recently done a 10K race or a half marathon, you can use your pace calculator there on that website, and it will adjust it to an equivalent marathon time for you. The other good thing that you can do as well is base your pacing off your long runs. So during your training, you'll want to incorporate some faster long runs into your schedule. That will give you a good idea as to whether that pace is obtainable and whether you can actually hold it for that long.
Thank you, James. How much slower should my long runs be compared to marathon pace?
Again, one of the kind of common pace indicators that people tend to use is going between 45 to 90 seconds slower per kilometer. Now, one thing is with this, obviously everybody's pace is different. So 45 seconds slower might be a big gap, might be a small gap. So that's one where I tend to personally go off percentages, but I also run off feel as well. So for me, what feels comfortable for my longer runs is around about 30 to 40% slower than my half marathon pace. So my half marathon pace is 3:20 per kilometer. So I won't do any long runs faster than 4 minutes to 4 minutes 30 per kilometer. But one thing, over the years, I've spoken to quite a lot of elite athletes. As a journalist, I've interviewed quite a few elite athletes as well. So I'm always keen to pick their brains to get an idea as to how they train and what they do. And there was one guy that I'd spoken to before, Josh Griffiths. He was a university student in the UK at Swansea, and he got a charity place for the London Marathon one year, trained himself. It was his first ever marathon, but he had obviously trained quite well. He ended up being the fastest Brit at the London Marathon and qualified for the Commonwealth Games. Incredible performance as a first-time marathon runner. And when I've spoken to him about like how he trained for the marathon and what he'd done, what he said is the best kind of training that you can do for your long run is to do, say, a 20 to 22 mile long run, just slightly slower than your marathon pace. Obviously, you're not going to be doing that every single week, but to incorporate one of those would be quite helpful.
Okay, so that's kind of answering my next question. Should I ever run my long runs at marathon pace? So maybe once in a while, but not too often, right?
What you might want to do to earlier in your training is maybe add a little bit of speed work towards the end of it. It's more about building that endurance and getting you used to the distance rather than the speed. That's what you do your interval sessions for. But what you can do is start building some speed work into the long runs. So for instance, you might want to do 5 to 10 kilometers at marathon pace in the training towards the end of the run. What I'd done yesterday, for instance, was I incorporated a bit of a hill session into a long run. So I'd done a 24-kilometer run, but towards the end, I'd done 8 lots of 600-meter hills. It's not going to be as fast as what I would be doing for my interval training. It's not going to be as fast as my usual interval training because you've got the fatigue of doing the long run at the same time. But that can also help to get you used to running fast when you're fatigued already. But then also on top of that, so I was recently training with a couple of my friends in Taiwan who were marathon training for the national games, which is obviously the best marathon runners across the country. And as part of their marathon training, I wasn't marathon training. So I was kind of dipping in and out of the session. I wasn't running the whole distance with them, but they were doing long, continuous tempo or speed work runs on the track in the build up to the marathon. So they weren't doing this every single week, up to 20 to 30 kilometers. So, I mean, it's quite a long run and quite monotonous being on the track. But one of the good things about doing the occasional bit of distance speed work on the track is you can monitor your pacing better. Same with the intervals. You can check the watch every 200 meters or every 400 meters to know whether you're hitting that consistent pace that you're aiming for. For some people, doing that at least once during your training can just give you that confidence to know that you can actually do that pace. But also on top of that, if you're doing it in the first 10k of a race or in 10k of the training, then that's when you're going to feel comfortable anyway. So that's when the pace isn't going to be challenging. So it's more important to know that you can do it towards the end. So yeah, that's what I would say anyway.
Perfect. Now, interesting with doing it in the track, but it makes a lot of sense.
Yeah. So I mean, it can be quite boring. So that's why it's better to have a group of you doing it together. You can push each other, but it's the same principle applies. When you're doing interval training, if you go 1 second or 2 seconds too fast per lap, your pace is going to drop off. And it's the same principle here. On race day, we've all done it. We've all got to the start line, been super excited, set off way too fast, and then those last few kilometers are nothing but pain. So again, with the track, because you've got clear 200-meter indicators, 400-meter indicators, it's just that much easier to keep the pace consistent throughout the entirety of the run.
And how do I know if I'm pacing my long runs correctly?
Yeah, so it should feel comfortable. So you should be able to still speak in full sentences, not be too breathless while you're running. And again, similar to what I was saying with the track, your key thing is consistency. So if you're getting towards the end of your long runs and suddenly your pace drops massively, then that suggests that you're not pacing yourself correctly because the fatigue kicked in. You should be able to run your final kilometer at the same speed that you're running your first kilometer. So if that's not the case, then you want to set off slower next time.
If you enjoyed this conversation and want to take your training to the next level, you can watch the full interview completely free.
And if you're after some fresh running gear that looks as good as it performs, head over to NordicTigon.com. We design everything ourselves to help you move better and feel faster. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to subscribe. Your support really means a lot to us.